All right, this next one is interesting. This was before the stories that we just read was going to be the top story today on our show, and I think it's going to give us a lot to talk about, but we'll see. Number 3, data mining YouTube channel Speclizer. I think I'm saying that right. Quietly released a video showing off some really interesting items that appear to be left over in The Last of Us Part 2's package files. In other words, there are assets in the game that are never used and never otherwise appear and seem to point towards the original intent of the game's once in existence, since cut multiplayer suite. The biggest asset is a map that shows an in-game location that actually merges single-player areas from the campaign together into one, including the motel and stores in Jackson, Wyoming, Port 66 and its accompanying parking garage and docks, the Coast Petroleum gas station and surrounding environs, and onward. While speculative, the YouTuber notes that the map is so seemingly enormous that there could have been some sort of battle royale component in The Last of Us Part 2 originally. Other assets were left behind too. A red set of almost VR-like goggles are labeled as the quote-unquote listen mode device, while a low-res item known only as a collar, in quotes, indicates that maybe dogs had a place in multiplayer as they did in single player, as it was originally conceived. There's also a low-res item called a quote-unquote handheld TV, perhaps an item to spy on your opponents. There are also a ton of armor, backpacks, and other items seemingly for Ellie and other players also in the data, though this YouTuber hasn't yet cracked them. The Last of Us Part 2 launched on PS4 in 2020 and was critically and commercially acclaimed, though also exceptionally controversial. The game was originally planned to include a multiplayer component, a likewise sequel to 2013's The Last of Us's beloved Factions mode. However, Naughty Dog later publicly explained its intent to release a standalone multiplayer experience, leaving The Last of Us 2 multiplayerless, but also 25 to 30 hours long. When we'll see the official reveal of the standalone game remains to be seen, though The Last of Us Part 2 did receive a PS5 performance patch this past May, indicating Naughty Dog's mind is still very much on this in this universe. Cody Smith wrote in and said, hello, podcast buds. According to the recently unearthed data files from The Last of Us Part 2, it looks like Factions was either going to or will have a large multiplayer map. Editorializing has linked this to a battle royale mode, but is it possible Factions will be more similar to something like Sea of Thieves or Grand Theft Auto Online, with an evolving map for a games as a service model, something PlayStation is notably lacking among its first party? So, Chris, this is an interesting hint about what could have been. The items are less interesting, I think, than the map itself, and they actually go into, which I think is really useful if you go watch this video, they go and show the actual places in the game that the map is identifying, and they are these massive locations that they've merged. What do you think about these little clues?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know really what to make of it. I wonder if, because it's hard to tell whether or not this is supposed to be like a proper, like, because the whole like map merging thing, the first time I remember that really happening was, I think in Black Ops 4, they had that the battle royale that Call of Duty had that wasn't Warzone. I think it was like, what the hell was it, Dustin? You remember? Like
Blackout. I was just thinking about that game earlier. It was so weird you mentioned that.
Call of Duty has 2 battle royale. Anyway,
the one's dead, I think, pretty much.
Yeah, good. But that was the first time I saw that, where they took a bunch of different multiplayer maps and like put them in the same kind of giant play space, which is like a great idea. Like that's been around for like a really, really long time. Just the idea of like having like, what if every map was playable at once type deal. It's like, it's very classic, like FPS kind of thought school. But I think that's usually indicative nowadays of battle royale, of just like, hey, drop in, scavenge, and like, you got this famous location and this famous location and this location that you recognize. But I don't know how battle royale really it works with The Last of Us, because it is about scavenging and it is about sort of being the last man standing in some ways. Like, you could stretch that into the tone of that game pretty easily, but at the same time, battle royale is so wacky in every other incarnation that I've ever seen it in, that it's hard for me to imagine like Ellie walking around with like a hot dog costume. You know what I mean? And just like all these like weird like other tropes of like, skins and, customizable, cosmetics and how that would work. So like part of me is wondering, like, is this supposed to be a battle royale, or is this supposed to be something more like GTA Online, which is also chaotic? And I don't know what to make of this. Like, it actually has me intrigued genuinely in Factions, because like prior to this, I was definitely going to play it, but I wasn't like necessarily like thinking about it all that much or like looking forward to it, because it's just like, it's just going to be more Last of Us. But if they do something interesting with battle royale and they make it not so absurdist and maybe like have some some version of that mode that's grounded in like the gritty realism that the game is rooted in, I think that could be really fun and cool and a neat way to differentiate itself from every other battle royale that seems to be really obsessed with just getting every single one of their players to buy the most flashy, expensive skin. Tone is important in gameplay, and I think if The Last of Us can keep that tone in a multiplayer setting, I think that could be pretty cool.
What do you think about this, Dustin? The possibilities here, items again less interesting, but maybe indicative of some of the skills you were going to get or whatever. It's also worth noting these are low res, incomplete items, but I'm always fascinated by stuff that's just left in games. I don't. I'm so persnickety and OCD that would annoy the shit out of me if I was building a game and just leaving assets in it for people to find.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they see this big map, they jump to Battle Royale, but I feel like there's a possibility that, of course, it could be Battle Royale, but the way that they're treating this multiplayer mode, it's been over a year at this point, right? Since Last of Us Part 2 came out.
Yep, June.
It's been over a year, and they mentioned, like, yeah, we're still working on the multiplayer mode. And so to me, this is going to be more than just a multiplayer mode, but a separate platform from The Last of Us. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see something along the lines of, think more of like a Red Dead or GTA Online. Like, I would imagine a scenario where you build your own character and you are in this world where there's like, you can go do missions, you can do more traditional multiplayer, or maybe even a situation where you have a game that is kind of like a survival game like Rust or something, where people can like set up their own camps and stuff like that. Either way, the point that I'm trying to make is that it's clear that their ambition for this multiplayer mode goes far beyond just an addition to The Last of Us Part 2, to the point where I would expect this to be something much, much larger than just, oh, we're putting all the maps together for a BR mode. I think that they see this as something special and something that they can mine and squeeze a bit for either, I don't know whether it'd be microtransactions or season pass, stuff like that. But I'm sure that Sony would be love the idea of getting a service game under their belt that can continually get money for them.
Yeah, that would be awesome for them. And I agree with you guys both that the potential here is so high that I think they have to be really deliberate and careful with how they treat this. I think that they've been pleasantly surprised by the reaction to some things that have been happening in the multiplayer space. I mean, Factions itself was a surprise to them right up to launch. I've said before that I remember speaking to Naughty Dog and Sony about how good it was when I was doing the review session, and they were like, really? Like, I'm like, yeah, and everyone agreed. Like, everyone loved it. So some things you just don't know. And I also think that maybe since then they've learned the lesson from Ghost of Tsushima Legends, which I think was foolish for Sucker Punch to put out for free. They could have potentially charged for that. So I think they look at it and say, like, people want to go back to these single player centric games and do multiplayer, have a multiplayer component as long as it's solid. So let's do it right. Because I really think they can make a $60 or $70 Last of Us multiplayer game. I think they just have to prove that it's worth that, and it can't be reused assets and all of that. So I don't know. We'll see. I find those YouTube channels really interesting though. Like, it's the same guy that does the outside the lines or outside the barriers, whatever they're called, videos.
Oh, Boundary Break or whatever.
I think it's the same dude.
Yeah.